LOL take two. LOL take two. LOL take two. Now listen. Like Kleenex is for facial tissue and Band-Aid is for adhesive bandages, the term Shady Pines has scored the ubiquitous position, certainly in my vernacular, as meaning a senior nursing home, assisted living, or a place where the seniors live. On the classic TV show, The Golden Girls, Estelle Getty's character, Sophia Petrillo, had escaped Shady Pines, where she had been sent to live by her daughter, Dorothy, immortalized by B. Arthur. In fact, if Sophia was getting out of line, B would instill the fear of God in her with these 3 words, "Shady Pines, Ma." As a result, the term stuck, and all my friends and family call pretty much any senior habitat Shady Pines. The baby boomers are all booming and can use some help, and in hindsight, we all should have invested in senior housing and senior amenities years ago. They have all these generic-sounding elder care businesses with lovely names like Visiting Angels or Assisting Hands, which sounds more to me like a Happy Endings massage service. My friend Sarah came up with the perfect idea for an elder care business that would have made us all a fortune called We Wash Grandma. Our dear friend and adopted family member, Ted, was 82 in 2002 and went to see his good friend B. Arthur opening on Broadway in her new one-woman show. He attended opening night, which was in February, caught pneumonia, and ended up in the hospital in New York. He had been staying at the Wellington Hotel, but we couldn't reach him there. We kept calling his answering machine in L.A., which was full, so we couldn't leave a message, and we were getting worried. We even called B. Arthur, and she said, "I don't know where he is." "B, you lost your friend Ted in New York?" A week later, we got a call from Ted in some awful Shady Pines rehab in Manhattan, where he had been sent after the hospital. A month later, he was finally back in L.A., and during many a cocktail hour entertained us with horror stories about his trip to Shady Pines. There was the mysterious Dr. Bradshaw, who showed up as a $4,000 charge on his insurance bill, but whom he had never met. When it was time to shower, this Jamaican lady would strip him down, seat him on a shower chair, spray him with water, and shout, "You wash your own privates." Obviously, We Wash Grandma could have come in handy. When I was growing up back in Iowa in the 60s and 70s, Shady Pines were scary places. My great-grandparents on my mom's side were in this dark place in Sioux City, Iowa, and once I was visiting and at 5 years old got cornered by a gaggle of old ladies in the TV room. I am sure they meant me no harm, but they scared the hell out of me. I stood there, clutching my bottle of Orange Crush as they came at me from all sides, some with canes, some with walkers, some in wheelchairs, coming closer and closer, saying, "Hey, little boy, what you got there?" It was like Night of the Living Dead zombies, only with blue hair and compression socks. I freaked out and began screaming at the top of my lungs. I pushed past them and ran for the front door, my mom chasing me down. My other great-grandma's place was nicer and had more light, but Indian Hills smelled so badly of urine your eyes would burn. When we visited Grandma Pete, or Petey Babes as we called her, she would ask countless times about my baby brother. "What's his name?" "Tim," we'd remind her. 5 minutes later, "What's his name?" "Tim." This game continued on until the last time she'd say, "What's his name?" and my mom, in frustration, would say, "Harold." Petey Babes would snap back, "No, it's not. It's Tim." Betty Davis is attributed with the quote, "Getting old ain't for sissies." Just look at the table of contents in the monthly AARP magazine and you get it. But in other ways, getting old is kind of freeing when you have some fun with it. Our wash-your-own privates friend Ted had a stroke in his late 80s, and a distant nephew swept in and took control of the poor guy's life, basically throwing him into a Shady Pines in Studio City called Inn on the Boulevard. Its name suggested a cozy B&B with a blazing fireplace and maybe a French person in a beret painting portraits in the courtyard. That was hardly the case. It was owned by some family and run by their odd little son who called it a senior motel, most likely to get around any regulatory or safety requirements. Speaking of Betty Davis, the woman who worked the front desk looked like baby Jane Hudson, complete with dyed blonde, age-inappropriate length hair, a face of makeup she had put on with a trowel, and the highest-pitched voice that made Minnie Mouse seem like a bass. We'd bring Ted back to his place after a night at our house or at the opera. Baby Jane would say hi, and in going back to Ted's room, we'd inevitably pass other seniors wandering the halls. The hallways smelled like Febreze and were covered top to bottom with art. And I use that term loosely. The art had obviously been left by deceased residents' families who didn't want them either. These were usually badly reproduced watercolor landscapes and paintings of kittens. We'd walk down the halls and Ted would point out that each one was as ghastly as the next. There was a woman who pushed a walker with an enormous purse on it and had one eye that looked off at a 45-degree angle. Ted graciously said good evening, and once we passed, he said, "She's a gypsy and just gave us the evil eye. She's got a deck of cards in that purse and will tell your fortune." Another time, we passed a sweet woman who said hi to us. Ted smiled, said hi, and just out of earshot, he pipes up, "She's a hooker, you know. She'll suck your dick for a Hershey Bar." Oh my God, Ted, shh! We'd scold him. But it was hilarious. He was 92. He didn't care. A decades-long friend of ours who turns 87 this year was suddenly hit with a myriad of health problems. It was as though she had suddenly won the chronic ailments lottery. She was living by herself in a dark one-bedroom apartment that cost a fortune, and it was time to look for a Shady Pines that offered some assistance and 3 meals a day. She has no family in town, and all her siblings are dead, so Bill and I began checking out Shady Pines here in LA so we could narrow them down to a couple of choices. Of course, what you can afford is a deciding factor in where you can move. We saw places basically run by used car salesmen, places that had a 20% occupancy, never a good sign, places whose one elevator had to be jerry-rigged to get the door to close and go to the ground floor. How much fun would that be in a fire? In fact, in the lobby of that place, which overlooked busy Oxnard Boulevard, this very sweet lady sat staring out at the rush hour traffic. We asked her if the food was good and if she liked it. She looked at us like we were crazy, shook her head, and mouthed, "No." Thankfully, our friend Maura mentioned a Shady Pines that hadn't been on our radar, which was a converted mid-century apartment complex. It had a couple of palm tree-filled courtyards that reminded me of the Golden Girls. It wasn't the most modern, but was very clean. You ate dinner from a menu. It was nearly at capacity, always a good sign. Plus, it had a wonderful staff, and we always had a good feeling when we left. Our friend chose that place, and we helped her move from the completely jammed one-bedroom apartment to her even more completely jammed 2 rooms at Shady Pines. This was not fun, let me tell you. Having to be the bad guy and saying, "Honey, this will not fit, you have to get rid of some of this stuff," was a nightmare of epic proportions. For 40 years we'd been great friends, but this really pushed the limits. Yet, we got her moved. Almost a year later, she still lives in unpacked boxes of junk she brought along with her. But she's safe and has 3 squares a day. I told Bill I had never realized our friend lived like this until now, like she's starring in an episode of Hoarders. My expectations of her downsizing and moving into her Shady Pines with streamlined belongings was just never going to happen. And I needed to get over it. I realized it was my problem, not hers. Our friend seems pretty happy, but does complain about the social cliques at her Shady Pines. Hey, people only sit with certain people and don't talk to certain other people, and there's definitely a social hierarchy. Oh my God, this brings me back to Urbandale High School and the cliques we encountered in the lunchroom. I think, really? This is like the movie Mean Girls, only you folks are like 85 and older. I remember when people would comment about seniors. Oh, he or she has gotten so mean or frugal or complaining in his or her old age. I don't agree with that anymore. On the contrary, I think as we get older, we're just the same, only more of what we were. Our Shady Pines friend was always a hoarder. She's just worse now. And our friend Ted was always naughty. He just filtered less as he got older because, well, frankly, he was 93 and didn't give a crap. In talking to Bill about my hypotheses, something dawns on me and I tell him, wow, you know what this means. This means that as I get older, I'm only going to become more fabulous. He looks at me, gives me his Judge Judy eye roll, and says, Shady Pines, Tony.
LOL take two. LOL take two. LOL take two. Ba 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 bum.